You are sitting in a room full of people half your age. They are talking fast. They are laughing at jokes you do not understand. And somewhere in your chest, there is a quiet burning. Not anger. Something worse. The slow realization that the world has learned to look through you. This is not a video about feeling better. This is not motivation. If you need someone to pump you up at 40, 50, or 60 years old, you have already surrendered the war. And I am not here to help men who have given up. This video is for a different kind of man. The one who feels the clock. The one who knows something is wrong, but cannot name it. The one who senses that the rules he followed for decades were written by people who did not care if he won or lost. I am going to show you what they never told you. There is a reason you feel invisible. There is a reason younger men do not seek your counsel. There is a reason your wife looks at you differently now. And none of these reasons are what you think. The truth is darker. And once you see it, you cannot go back. Schopenhauer wrote that most men live their entire lives in a state of quiet confusion. They chase pleasure. They run from pain. They build identities around things that rust and rot. And when those things crumble, they discover they were never really there at all. That is what happens to men after 40. The masks start slipping. The roles stop fitting. The script society gave you at 20 no longer works. And nobody prepared you for this. You were told to work hard. You did. You were told to provide. You did. You were told that if you followed the path, respect and peace would come. You did everything right. So why do you feel like a stranger in your own life? Here is the answer nobody wants to say out loud. You were never meant to peak at 30 and coast. You were never meant to hand over your power to institutions, relationships, or routines. You were never meant to become furniture in your own house. You were meant to become dangerous, not violent, not reckless. Dangerous in the way that a man who has nothing left to prove becomes dangerous. A man who sees the game clearly. A man who no longer plays by rules that hurt him. Robert Greene spent years studying power. He read thousands of pages of history. He watched how kings fell and how beggars rose. And he came to one conclusion that should terrify you. Most people do not lose power because it is taken from them. That is what happens after 40. You get tired. You get comfortable. You start saying yes to things you should reject. You start tolerating people who drain you. You start shrinking to avoid conflict. And one morning you wake up and realize you do not recognize the man in the mirror. But here is what Machiavelli understood 500 years ago. The same age that weakens most men is the age that can forge others into something unbreakable. You have seen more than the young ones. You have survived failures they cannot imagine. You have been betrayed, disappointed, and knocked to the ground more times than you can count. That is not weakness. That is raw material. The question is whether you will use it, or whether you will keep pretending that everything is fine while the years slip past like water through open fingers. I am not going to lie to you in this video. I am not going to tell you that age is just a number or that your best years are ahead. That is cheap comfort. That is what weak men tell each other so they can sleep at night. The truth is harder. Your best years might be behind you. They might not. That depends entirely on what you do next. And most men will do nothing. They will watch this video. They will nod. They will agree. And then they will close the tab and go back to the same patterns that are slowly killing them. But not you. If you are still watching, there is something different inside you. A hunger. A refusal. a quiet rage that has not yet found its target. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to do with that fire. I am going to teach you the principles that Schopenhauer, Green, and Machiavelli understood about power, perception, and the hidden games that run beneath the surface of every human interaction. These are not nice ideas. They are not comfortable. They will challenge everything you believe about fairness, decency, and how the world should work. But here is what I know for certain. The men who master these principles do not fade. They do not become invisible. They do not spend their final decades wondering what went wrong. They become the ones that others remember. The question is simple. Do you want to be remembered? Or do you want to be comfortable? Because you cannot have both. And the clock is running. Let us begin with the first truth that will change everything. The reason you feel powerless is not because power has been taken from you. It is because you never understood what power actually is. And that mistake has cost you more than you know. Most men think power is about control. They think it means telling others what to do. They think it means money, muscles, or a loud voice. This is a child's understanding. And it explains why so many men over 40 feel powerless despite having achieved everything they were told to chase. Machiavelli studied leaders who rose and fell across centuries of Italian history. He watched men with massive armies get destroyed by opponents with clever minds. He watched rich families collapse while poor strategists built empires from nothing. And he identified something that most people still do not grasp. Power is not a resource you acquire. Power is a relationship. It exists only between people. And the moment you misunderstand this, you begin losing it. Think about your own life. You might have money, you might have a title, you might have a house and a family, and all the external signs of success. But when you walk into a room, do people adjust their posture? Do they listen when you speak? Do they seek your opinion before making decisions? If the answer is no, then your external achievements mean nothing. You have the appearance of power without the substance. This is the trap that catches men after 40. They build lives around symbols, the car, the job title, the bank account. They think these things will automatically generate respect. But symbols without presence are just decorations on an empty building. Robert Greene calls this the difference between position and influence. Position is what society gives you. Influence is what you create. And influence always wins. You can lose your position overnight. A company can fire you. A market can crash. An illness can take your strength. But influence operates at a deeper level. It lives in how others feel when they are around you. And here is what most men never learn. Influence is built through strategic withdrawal, not aggressive display. This goes against everything you were taught. You were told to assert yourself, to compete, to show strength through force. But Schopenhauer understood human nature better than any motivational speaker ever will. He knew that humans are driven by will, not logic, not reason. Will. An endless striving that never finds satisfaction. And when you push against another person's will directly, you trigger their resistance. They push back. They defend. They fight. But when you withdraw strategically, something strange happens. You create a vacuum. And vacuums demand to be filled. The other person moves toward you. They seek your approval. They wonder why you are not chasing them like everyone else does. This is the secret that powerful older men understand. They stop trying to prove themselves. They stop explaining. They stop seeking validation. And paradoxically, this is exactly when validation starts flowing toward them. Watch an older man who commands genuine respect. He does not talk much. He does not try to impress. He waits. He observes. He chooses his words like a surgeon chooses where to cut. And when he speaks, people listen, not because he demands it, because his silence created space for his words to matter. Now compare this to the desperate energy of a man who has not learned this lesson. He interrupts. He brags. He drops names and references accomplishments. He is performing strength. But everyone in the room can smell the weakness underneath. Jung called this the shadow, the part of ourselves we try to hide, the insecurity, the fear, the sense that we are not enough. Most men spend their lives running from their shadow. They build elaborate masks to cover it, but the mask never fits perfectly. And others can always sense the gap between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. Men after 40 have a unique opportunity. They have lived long enough to know their shadow intimately. They have seen their own failures. They have felt their own fears. The question is whether they will integrate these parts or keep running from them. Jung believed that true power comes from integration, from accepting the darkness within yourself instead of projecting it onto others, from becoming whole rather than remaining fragmented. This is not soft psychology. This is strategic reality. A man who knows his weaknesses cannot be surprised by them. A man who has faced his fears cannot be controlled through fear. A man who has accepted his mortality does not waste time on trivial battles. He becomes calm, and calm is the foundation of real power. But here is where most men make a critical error. They confuse calm with passivity. They think acceptance means giving up. They believe that if they stop fighting, they will be trampled. This is the opposite of what actually happens. When you stop fighting unnecessary battles, you conserve energy for the ones that matter. When you stop reacting to every provocation, you become unpredictable. When you accept reality instead of arguing with it, you can finally work with it. Epictetus was a slave who became one of the most respected philosophers in Rome. He understood something that free men often miss. The only thing you truly control is your response. Everything else is weather. It comes and goes. Fighting the weather is exhausting and pointless. But learning to move with it, to use its force, to find shelter when needed, and advance when possible, that is wisdom. And wisdom is what men after 40 should be accumulating. Not more possessions, not more achievements, not more validation. Wisdom about how humans actually work, about what truly motivates people, about the invisible currents that shape every interaction. This brings us to the next truth, the one that will reshape how you see every relationship in your life. And every conversation you have ever had contains two layers, the words being spoken, and the real negotiation happening beneath them. Most people only hear the first layer. They take words at face value. They believe what others tell them. They assume honesty is the default. This is naive. And naivety in a man over 40 is not innocence. It is negligence. Robert Greene spent years mapping the tactics that humans use to get what they want. Flattery, misdirection, strategic vulnerability, manufactured urgency, selective truth. These are not tricks used only by villains. These are basic tools of human interaction. Your mother used them on you. Your teachers used them. Your spouse uses them. Your children use them. Everyone is always playing a game. The only question is whether you see the board. Now, I am not telling you this to make you paranoid. Paranoia is just as dangerous as naivety. It makes you rigid. It destroys trust. It isolates you from genuine connection. The goal is not to suspect everyone. The goal is to observe accurately, to see what is actually happening instead of what you wish were happening. Machiavelli called this clear-eyed realism. He was not cynical. He simply refused to pretend that humans were different than they actually are. And humans are complicated. They want things. They fear things. They have needs they rarely admit out loud. They have wounds they protect at all costs. When you understand this, you stop taking things personally. That colleague who undermined you was not evil. He was afraid of being overlooked. That friend who betrayed you was not a monster. He made a calculation that his interests mattered more than yours. This is not an excuse for bad behavior. It is an explanation. And explanations are power. When you understand why people do what they do, you can predict what they will do next. You can position yourself accordingly. You can protect what matters and release what does not. But here is the part that most dark psychology content gets wrong. Understanding human nature is not about manipulation. It is about navigation. There is a difference between seeing the game clearly and playing it dishonestly. A man of integrity can observe the hidden currents without swimming in them. He can protect himself without becoming a predator. This is crucial, because the moment you start manipulating others for personal gain, you begin destroying something inside yourself. Schopenhauer warned about this. He said that when we cause suffering to others, we create a wound in our own will. We fracture ourselves. We become the thing we once despised. The goal is not to become a manipulator. The goal is to stop being manipulated. And men after 40 are especially vulnerable to certain kinds of manipulation. First, there is the exploitation of obligation. You have spent decades building relationships, making sacrifices, doing favors, and some people will use that history against you. They will remind you of what you owe. They will leverage guilt to extract more from you. Second, there is the weaponization of age. Society tells you that older men should step aside, that your time has passed, that you should make room for younger generations. Some people will use this narrative to push you out of positions you earned. Third, there is the manipulation through intimacy. Partners who have watched your vulnerabilities for years know exactly where to strike. They know your fears. They know your shame. And some will use that knowledge to control you. I am not saying everyone in your life is doing this. Most people are not consciously manipulating anyone. They are just following patterns they learned in childhood. They do not even know they are doing it. But that does not mean you should tolerate it. Freud understood that humans run on patterns established long before they could think clearly. Attachment styles, defense mechanisms, unconscious scripts that dictate behavior. You have your patterns. Others have theirs. And when patterns collide, someone usually gets hurt. The man who understands his own patterns has a massive advantage. He can catch himself before he reacts automatically. He can choose a different response. He can break cycles that have run for decades. This is why self-knowledge is not self-indulgence. It is tactical necessity. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most men over 40 are still being directed by the fears of the boy they once were. The need for approval, the terror of rejection, the desperate hunger to prove they are enough. These are the levers that others pull without even trying. A man who has faced these patterns honestly becomes much harder to manipulate. He knows when his buttons are being pushed. He knows when someone is playing on his insecurities. He knows when a request is genuine and when it is a trap. This awareness does not make him cold. It makes him free. And freedom is what every man over 40 should be building toward. Not the freedom to do whatever he wants. That is adolescent fantasy. But the freedom from being controlled by fears and desires he never chose. There is a specific practice that accelerates this process. It comes from the Stoics, refined by Albert Ellis centuries later. And it will reveal exactly where you are still being played. We will get to that practice in a moment. But first, you need to understand the biggest illusion that keeps men trapped long after they should have escaped. You have been lied to about what makes a man valuable. Not by one person, by everyone. By the entire structure of society that benefits from your confusion. The lie is simple. It says that your worth depends on what you produce. That you are only as good as your last achievement. That the moment you stop generating value for others, you become disposable. This is not accidental. This is design. Hobbes wrote about the state of nature. The war of all against all. He believed that humans needed strong systems to contain their selfish impulses. What he did not say clearly enough is that those systems also exploit the humans within them. You have spent your working life making others rich. You have traded your time, your health, your attention for money that you then gave to banks, stores, and governments. You have been a production unit. And production units are replaced when they slow down. This is the terror that grips men after 40. Not the fear of death. The fear of uselessness. When you are young, you have potential. Society invests in you because you might become profitable. When you are middle-aged, you have proven output. Society tolerates you because you are still producing. But what happens when the output slows? When the body weakens? When the mind loses its sharpness? Society has no use for you. And you know it. This is why so many men fall apart after retirement. They have built their entire identity around productivity. When that ends, they do not know who they are anymore. They shrink. They decline. They wait for death because they have nothing else to wait for. But here is the truth that the system does not want you to understand. Your worth was never in your production. That was a story told to keep you compliant. Your worth is inherent. It exists because you exist, and no amount of output can increase it or decrease it. Schopenhauer argued that the will to life drives everything, this endless striving, wanting, needing. But he also saw that beneath the will is something deeper, a ground of being that is not dependent on achievement or acquisition. Most men never find this ground. They spend their entire lives on the surface, chasing and running, never stopping long enough to feel what exists beneath. Men after 40 have a chance to go deeper, not because they are wiser by default, but because the distractions start losing their power. The pleasures that once captivated them begin to feel hollow. The achievements that once thrilled them start to seem pointless. This is not depression. This is an invitation. When the old games stop working, new possibilities emerge. When the masks stop fitting, the real face can finally appear. When the striving exhausts itself, stillness becomes possible. But most men fight this transition instead of embracing it. They try to recapture youth. They chase younger women. They buy sports cars. They take on challenges designed for bodies they no longer have. They exhaust themselves trying to prove that nothing has changed. Everything has changed. And that is not a tragedy. It is an opportunity. Nietzsche wrote about the three metamorphoses. The spirit first becomes a camel, bearing heavy loads. Then it becomes a lion, fighting for freedom. Finally, it becomes a child, creating new values with innocence and play. Most men are stuck in the camel phase their entire lives. They carry what others put on their backs. They never find the lion's courage or the child's creativity. The transition to lion requires destruction. You must kill the old identity. You must tear down the beliefs that kept you small. You must say no to the expectations that have been crushing you for decades. This is terrifying, because without the old identity, who are you? That question keeps most men trapped forever. They would rather stay in a prison they know than walk through a door into unknown territory. But the men who walk through that door discover something remarkable. On the other side of identity, death is identity choice. You get to decide who you become. Not based on what society needs from you, not based on what your parents programmed into you, not based on what your wounds demand from you, based on what calls you. This is the mature masculine. Not the loud, aggressive posturing of young men, not the desperate clinging of men who fear their decline, but the calm, centered presence of a man who has stopped asking for permission to exist. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire while writing philosophy in his tent at night. He did not need external validation. He had found an internal anchor. His meditations are not the words of a man seeking approval. They are the words of a man conversing with himself about how to live with integrity. That is what becomes possible after 40. Not despite the losses. Because of them. Every failure you have experienced is fuel. Every betrayal is a lesson. Every wound is a doorway to understanding, but you must choose to use them. Otherwise, they just sit in your basement, rotting. The practice I mentioned earlier comes from the Stoics. It was refined by Albert Ellis into something he called rational examination, and it goes directly at the lies you tell yourself. Here is how it works, and here is why it will change everything about how you experience the next 20 years. Every emotion you experience is preceded by a thought you may not notice. This is not philosophy. This is neuroscience. The brain generates interpretations before it generates feelings. And most of those interpretations are automatic, running in the background without your awareness. Albert Ellis built his entire therapeutic approach around this insight. He called the automatic interpretations irrational beliefs. Not because they were crazy, because they were never examined. Most men over 40 are running on beliefs they adopted at 15. Beliefs about what makes them worthy. Beliefs about what others think of them. Beliefs about what they must never show or feel. These beliefs generate their emotions. These emotions generate their behaviors. These behaviors generate their results. And their results seem to confirm their original beliefs. It is a closed loop. A prison made of thoughts that feel like facts. Breaking this loop requires a specific intervention. Not positive thinking, not affirmations. Those are bandages on a wound that needs surgery. The intervention is questioning. When you feel a strong negative emotion, you stop. You ask yourself, what must I be believing for this emotion to make sense? And then you ask, is that belief actually true? Let me give you an example that affects almost every man watching this. You are at a social gathering. A younger man is telling a story. Everyone laughs. You try to add something, but your timing is off. Nobody responds. You feel a wave of shame. What is the belief underneath that shame? Usually something like, I must be interesting, or I have no value, or being ignored means I am becoming invisible, or my best days are behind me. These beliefs feel true. They feel like observations of reality. But they are not observations. They are interpretations, and interpretations can be questioned. Is it actually true that one awkward moment defines your worth? Is it actually true that a group of strangers not laughing at your comment means you are declining? Is it actually true that social approval is the measure of a man? When you start questioning, the grip loosens. The shame becomes smaller. Not because you talked yourself out of it, because you saw it clearly for what it was. A reaction to a story you told yourself. This practice takes time. It requires honesty. It demands that you look at beliefs you have been protecting your entire life. But the freedom on the other side is worth it. Robert Greene writes about the strategic benefits of emotional control. When you can manage your reactions, you become unpredictable. Others cannot push your buttons because You have disconnected the wiring. But there is a deeper benefit he does not emphasize as strongly. When you stop being controlled by irrational beliefs, you stop suffering unnecessarily. You still feel pain. You still experience loss. But you stop adding layers of interpretation that make everything worse. Epictetus said it clearly. It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. A man who masters his judgments masters his experience. Now here is where this connects to dark psychology. Most manipulation works by triggering your irrational beliefs. Someone insults your competence because they know you secretly doubt yourself. Someone questions your masculinity because they sense you are insecure about aging. Someone withdraws affection because they know you cannot tolerate abandonment. They are not attacking you directly. They are activating your own self-attacks. When you have examined and weakened those automatic beliefs, the attacks lose power. The insult lands but does not penetrate. The withdrawal hurts but does not devastate. The challenge arrives but does not overwhelm. This is true psychological armor. Not the armor of denial or repression. The armor of clarity. A man who sees himself accurately is very hard to destabilize. His confidence does not depend on constant validation because it is not built on shaky interpretations. This takes us to the question of relationships after 40. Because relationships are where most men either find renewal or accelerate their decline. The choice you make about who to spend your remaining time with is the most consequential decision of your later years. Schopenhauer was famously pessimistic about human connection. He said that humans are like hedgehogs in winter. They need each other's warmth, but keep pricking each other with their spines. There is truth in this, but it is not the whole truth. The hedgehog dilemma assumes the spines are fixed, that you cannot smooth them, that closeness always means pain. But the work we have been discussing, examining beliefs, integrating shadow, developing emotional mastery, this work smooths the spines. It makes closeness possible without constant wounding. Men who have not done this work tend to either isolate or enmesh. They either push everyone away to protect themselves, or they merge with others so completely they lose themselves. Neither path leads anywhere good. The mature masculine holds a different position. Close enough to connect, distant enough to maintain identity, warm enough to nurture, boundaried enough to protect. This balance does not come naturally. It must be learned, and men over 40 have an advantage in learning it. They have seen what happens when the balance tips. They have experienced the loneliness of isolation and the suffocation of enmeshment. They have data that younger men lack. The question is whether they will use that data, or whether they will repeat the same patterns while expecting different results. What comes next is the principle that will determine whether your final decades are marked by connection or loneliness, and it contradicts almost everything you have been taught about love. Plato wrote about love as a ladder. You begin attracted to a beautiful body, then you ascend to beautiful souls, then to beautiful ideas, finally to beauty itself, the pure form beyond any particular instance. This is lovely philosophy. It is also mostly useless for practical life. The real psychology of connection is darker and more mechanical, not in a way that makes it less meaningful, in a way that makes it more manageable. Robert Greene identifies several laws governing human attachment. They are not romantic, they are not flattering, but they are accurate. First, people bond through intermittent reinforcement, not through constant affection, not through predictable behavior, through unpredictability mixed with reward. This is why relationships that are easy often become boring. This is why partners who are slightly mysterious maintain attraction longer than those who are completely available. The manipulation of this principle is common. People create artificial drama to stimulate bonding. They withdraw strategically to increase desire. They manufacture uncertainty to keep others attached. But understanding the principle does not mean you must exploit it. What it means is that healthy relationships need rhythm, closeness and distance, connection and solitude, predictability and surprise. Men over 40 often kill relationships by becoming too predictable. They settle into routines. They stop courting. They become furniture. And then they wonder why the spark disappeared. The spark did not disappear because love died. It disappeared because the rhythm stopped. Because intermittent became constant. Because surprise became routine. This can be fixed, but it requires intention. The second principle is more uncomfortable. People bond through shared struggle, not shared comfort. Think about your closest friends. When did those bonds form? Usually during difficulty, during challenge, during mutual effort against an external obstacle. Now think about your romantic relationship. When was the connection strongest? Often early on, when everything was uncertain, when you had to work to build something together, when the future was unclear. Comfort erodes connection, not immediately, slowly, one comfortable day at a time. This is why couples need projects, shared goals, difficulties they face together. Without these, the relationship becomes two people watching the same television in the same room. Parallel existence without genuine intersection. Men after 40 must actively create challenge in their relationships. Not conflict. Challenge. Something you are building together. Something that requires both of you to show up fully. Otherwise, the drift is inevitable. And the drift leads to either quiet resignation or explosive exit. The third principle cuts deepest. People stay bonded when their identities are invested. When leaving would mean losing part of themselves. This sounds like codependence. It can be if done unconsciously. But done consciously, it is integration. The goal is not to merge until you cannot tell where one person ends and another begins. The goal is to build something together that belongs to both of you. A life, a family, a shared mission, something that would be diminished if either person walked away. This is why transactional relationships always feel hollow. When everything can be divided cleanly, nothing really holds you together. But here is the danger for men over 40. Many have invested their identity in relationships that are already dead. They stay not because of love, but because leaving would require them to rebuild themselves. And they are terrified of that rebuilding. This is not integration. This is imprisonment. The difference is whether you stay because something is being created or whether you stay because you fear destruction. Creation pulls forward. Fear freezes in place. Machiavelli wrote that men must know when to hold their position and when to advance. The same applies to relationships. Sometimes the courageous act is to stay and rebuild. Sometimes the courageous act is to leave and recover. There is no formula. There is only honest assessment. What is being created here? What is dying? What would I do if I were not afraid? These questions require brutal honesty. And most people avoid brutal honesty because the answers might require change. But men after 40 do not have time for comfortable lies. Schopenhauer said that truth can wait because it lives a long time. But that is only true for abstract truths. Personal truths are perishable. The truth about your relationship, the truth about your work, the truth about how you are spending your remaining years. These truths have expiration dates. Wait too long, and the moment for action passes. The door closes. The option disappears. What I have been describing is not pessimism. It is realism that enables good choices. When you understand how bonding actually works, you can nurture genuine connection without stumbling into manipulation. You can create rhythm without creating chaos. You can invest identity without losing yourself. This is the mature approach to relationship, not the naive idealism of youth, not the bitter cynicism of disappointment, something in between, something earned through observation and practice. And it applies not just to romantic partnerships, but to all significant bonds, friendships, family relationships, professional alliances. The principles remain the same: intermittent reinforcement, shared challenge, identity investment. Master these, and your later years will be rich with connection. Ignore them, and you will find yourself increasingly isolated, wondering what went wrong. The final segment brings everything together: the practical architecture for the next phase of your life, and the one question that separates men who fade from men who finish with power. You have between 5,000 and 15,000 mornings left. That is the statistical range for a man over 40 in reasonable health. Some will have more. Many will have less. This is not morbid. This is mathematical. And mathematics does not care about your feelings. Lamarck believed that organisms adapt to their environment through use and disuse. Organs that are exercised grow stronger. Organs that are neglected wither. He was wrong about how this works genetically. But he was right about how it works psychologically. The capacities you use will strengthen. The capacities you neglect will disappear. Right now, you are choosing which version of yourself will exist at 60, 70, 80. Not through dramatic decisions, through daily patterns, through what you repeat. The man who reads difficult books becomes capable of difficult thinking. The man who avoids challenge becomes incapable of facing it. The man who practices presence becomes present. The man who distracts himself becomes scattered. There are no days off from this process. Every day, you are either building or declining. Maintenance is an illusion. Stasis does not exist for biological systems. This is why passive entertainment is so dangerous for men over 40. Every hour spent consuming is an hour not spent creating. Every evening numbed by screens is an evening not spent developing. I am not saying you should never relax. I am saying you should know the cost. The cost is your future self. The man you will become is being shaped by what you do today. Freud talked about the pleasure principle and the reality principle. Children run entirely on pleasure. They want what feels good right now. Adults develop the capacity to delay, to sacrifice present comfort for future gain. But many men over 40 have regressed. They have worked hard for decades and feel entitled to comfort. They coast. They indulge. They slowly dissolve back into childish patterns while telling themselves they have earned it. Earning rest is real. But rest is not the same as decline. Rest restores. Decline depletes. Learn the difference or pay the price. Now, let me give you the architecture, the actual structure for the remaining years. There are 4 domains. Each requires attention. Neglect anyone, and the whole structure weakens. The first domain is body, not vanity. Function. Can you move without pain? Can you climb stairs without gasping? Can you carry groceries, play with grandchildren, handle emergencies? This is baseline. Without physical capacity, every other domain suffers. Your mood depends on your biology. Your thinking depends on blood flow and sleep. Your relationships depend on energy and presence. Train your body not for appearance, but for capability. This is not optional. This is foundation. The second domain is mind. Are you still learning? Still challenging your assumptions? Still capable of changing your views when evidence demands it? Mental rigidity is the first sign of decline. The man who knows everything has stopped growing. The man who cannot tolerate disagreement has become fragile. The man who consumes but never creates is already fading. Read what challenges you. Discuss what confuses you. Build arguments for positions you reject. This keeps the mind alive. The third domain is connection. We covered this extensively, but let me add one element. Younger men need you, not as authority figures to obey, but as examples to observe. They are watching how older men handle difficulty. They are looking for evidence that integrity is possible, that strength and kindness can coexist, that aging does not have to mean defeat. Every interaction with a younger man is a chance to demonstrate something. What you demonstrate is your choice. The fourth domain is contribution. What are you building that will outlast you? This does not have to be grandiose. It can be as simple as a garden that others will enjoy. A skill passed to grandchildren. A business that employs people. A book. A song. A building. Something that says you were here. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we are all leaves on the same tree. The winds of time will blow us away, but the tree remains. What did you add to the tree? This question should guide your remaining years. Not the question of what you can get, the question of what you can give. Paradoxically, contribution is the fastest path to fulfillment. Not because it makes you feel noble, because it connects you to something larger than your individual drama. The individual drama is exhausting. The same fears playing on loop. The same wounds opening again. The same questions without answers. But when you serve something beyond yourself, the drama quiets. Not because the problems disappear, because they stop mattering as much. This is the secret that Machiavelli understood about leaders who lasted. They attached themselves to causes bigger than their egos. They became instruments of something that would continue after their deaths. Men over 40 can do this at any scale. You do not need an empire. You need purpose. Something to build that matters. Find it or fade. This is the choice that every man watching this video faces. Not someday. Now. The clock started the moment you were born. It has not paused once. It will not pause for your comfort, or your confusion, or your hesitation. What will you build with the time remaining? What will you become? Who will remember you? And for what? These are the questions of the mature masculine. They are not comfortable questions. They are not questions with easy answers. But they are the only questions worth asking. If this video has meant something to you, if it has shown you something you needed to see, I want you to do one thing. Save it. Return to it. Let it work on you over time. Because understanding is not transformation. Only action transforms, and your time for action is now.